Hi, and welcome to another Magnolia Minute. My name is Granny Eloi, Natchitoches Parish School Board Superintendent. Today I'm here to talk to you about some recent releases from the Office of Public Health concerning COVID-19. I want to start off by letting you know that our school district has been doing a great job of preventing the spread of COVID-19. We've had very few positive cases, and those cases have come from community spread. We have had a lot of quarantines, but I want to reiterate that quarantines are a good thing. It means we're preventing the spread of COVID-19. I also want to mention that I've been in every school, and when I'm in these schools, I've seen every student, every faculty member masked up, and really I've been very impressed by how diligently we've been dealing with this, from students to teachers and to staff. The second point I want to share with you is you're probably hearing a lot of rumors. And some of you may even think that we're not being transparent as a district. But what I want to let you know is that we are being as transparent as we are allowed to by the law. Unfortunately, because of HIPAA, we cannot share every bit of information that we have regarding COVID-19. That is to protect your students, and if you're a teacher, to protect your privacy. What's going to happen is if your student is exposed to COVID-19, you will be informed. You will get a letter. Just because there's a positive case at your school, though, at your child's school, does not mean you will be informed. Only if you've come into, or if your child has come into, close contact with the individual who's positive, will you be informed. And again, this is due to HIPAA regulations in protecting the privacy of our staff and our students. The third point we want to let you know is we want to strongly encourage you, if you're a teacher, a staff member, or a student, or a parent of a student, to not come to school or allow your child to come to school if you have one of the three following major symptoms. And those major symptoms are a persistent cough, shortness of breath, or the loss of smell or taste. If you have one of those, please do not come to school or send your child to school. If you have two of the following minor symptoms, please do the same. Those minor symptoms include fever, chills, rigors, myalgia, headache, sore throat, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, congestion, or runny nose or fatigue. Basically, if you feel any of those typical flu-like or strep-like symptoms, you do not need to come to school. The reason for this is the Office of Public Health has updated their quarantining procedures and guidelines. What that means for you is if your child comes to school with any one of those major symptoms or two of those minor symptoms, and they are in close contact with any individuals, all of those individuals and your child will be quarantined. Now, what is close contact? Close contact is an accumulation of 15 minutes being within 6 feet of another individual, even if you're wearing your masks. Yes, the masks are still important because they help prevent the spread, but they do not help prevent you from being quarantined. So, there's some information there we need to unpack. What that means is if you're quarantined because of symptoms, you can go to the doctor and get an alternative diagnosis. For instance, you have a runny nose, you have a headache. You go to the doctor and the doctor says that you have seasonal allergies. As long as we get written confirmation of that from the doctor, you can break out of quarantine. The other possibility is that you would get a COVID-19 test. In this situation, if you were to receive a negative test, you could test out of the quarantine. Now, let's talk about the test. In order for you to test out of a quarantine, it has to be a PCR non-rapid test. When you go to the doctor, simply tell them that you cannot have a rapid test. The reason for this is there are too many false negatives being reported by the rapid test. The other thing you need to realize is many of you have been told that you cannot test out of a quarantine. That is still true, but what we're talking about here is quarantining due to symptoms. What we've been talking about is quarantining due to positive exposure to a positive case. You can never test out of exposure to a positive case. So again, let me reiterate, you can test out of or get an alternative diagnosis for symptoms. You cannot test out of or get an alternative diagnosis to exposure to a known positive. Again, we are wanting you to keep your children at home out of an abundance of caution, because if you do not only will your child be quarantined for their symptoms, but their classmates will be as well. The fourth point is many people are asking how long are quarantines. If you test positive for COVID-19, you will be quarantined for 10 days, starting at the point of your positive test. If you are being quarantined due to exposure or due to symptoms, you will be quarantined for 14 days. Now, let's add another layer to it. Suppose that your spouse or a parent who lives in the same house as you tests positive. You will have to quarantine for their entire 10 days, and then on that last day of their quarantine, you would have still been exposed to a known positive case, meaning that you did their 10 days and then you began your 14 days due to exposure after that. And again, remember, you cannot test out of a quarantine due to positive exposure. The fifth point. Many of you are very concerned about your student absences. I can assure you of one thing. Your student will not be penalized for being absent due to COVID-19, whether it's a positive case or quarantine. Number one, these will all be considered excused absences. And number two, we are telling teachers and principals to work with families to help them be able to make up their work when they return from quarantine, but also in most circumstances be able to continue their work while they're quarantined, whether that's through Google Classroom or packets of material that's sent home. We are aware of the unusual nature of the school year, and we are very much wanting to collaborate with parents and students to make COVID-19 not adversely affect them if they go home for any length of time. Finally, two more additional items. First, these are guidelines from public health. They are not rigid, and there are perhaps times where additional context will mean that we change course and do things differently than these guidelines suggest. Please be understanding of this and flexible when you are called by Office of Public Health or the school district. Finally, many of our students are doing excellent in virtual school. Unfortunately, some of our students are struggling. They're struggling either academically, they're failing multiple classes, they're failing to participate appropriately, they're just not logging in, or they're failing to communicate with their teachers. What we recognize is that we cannot just simply exit a student from virtual. We have to give time to that student to be able to improve their situation. So, after 6 weeks of school, we will be informing parents and students if they are on academic probation. If they are on academic probation and they're in virtual school, what we will be telling them is they have the 3 final weeks of the 9 weeks to improve their situation. That could be bringing up their grades from failing to passing. It could be that they begin to actually participate in the classroom, or they actually start to communicate with their teachers. As long as they show improvement, they will remain in virtual if they so choose. If they do not show that marked improvement, we as a district, along with teachers and principals, will make a decision that ultimately they will have to exit virtual and enter face-to-face school. This is for their benefit so that they can continue to be successful in school and that they do not fall further behind simply because of the COVID-19 virus. We thank you for understanding this. And remember, together we can.